The most frightening fortress may be the one an enemy cannot see. Stand on the surface of Cappadocia in central Turkey, and the landscape seems almost theatrical. Pale valleys, wind-cut pillars, and soft volcanic rocks sculpted into impossible shapes. But beneath the town of Derinkuyu, the ground opens into something far stranger, not a cave, not a tomb, but a layered underground settlement descending roughly 85 meters, or close to 280 feet. There are passages, storage rooms, animal stalls, wells, ventilation shafts, religious spaces, and chambers connected across multiple levels. It was not carved overnight by a single king. There is no solid evidence that it was built for one apocalyptic event. The less cinematic explanation is also the more disturbing one. Different communities expanded it over a long period because life on the surface kept becoming dangerous. Cappadocia made this possible. Much of the region is formed from tough compacted volcanic ash that can be cut relatively easily, yet hardens at the exposed surface. Instead of hauling enormous stones upward to build walls, people could carve inward. A storage cellar could become a room. A room could connect to a corridor. Later generations could deepen the system, add doors, shafts, and communal spaces. Then adapt the same rock to new threats. The earliest phases of Derinkuyu remain debated. That uncertainty matters. Saying the ancients built it creates the illusion of one plan, one people, one moment. In reality, the underground city is more like a survival manuscript edited by generation after generation. Some chambers may have served ordinary purposes such as storage and protection from extreme temperatures. Over time, connected spaces became something larger, a refuge capable of absorbing a community when danger arrived. And refuge is the key word. This was not necessarily a permanent rejection of the surface. It was a way to disappear from it. A tower announces itself from miles away. A wall tells an attacker exactly where resistance begins. An underground entrance can vanish inside a courtyard, a storeroom, or an ordinary house. When raiders approached, the settlement above could appear abandoned. People, livestock, food, tools, and sacred objects moved below. The attacker did not face a city waiting to be conquered. He faced a village whose population had seemingly dissolved into the earth. Why keep going deeper? Because shallow hiding places are easier to discover, smoke out, or break open. Depth creates delay. Between the entrance and the most protected spaces lay narrow corridors, turns, and levels that could be sealed independently. Every meter downward weakened the advantages of cavalry, long weapons, and superior numbers. Surface power had to be recalculated in darkness. But do not imagine a comfortable subterranean kingdom. Sunlight vanished. Direction became uncertain. Air, water, waste, food, and human behavior had to be managed. People did not descend because they loved the underground. They descended because, at certain moments, survival meant giving up the sky without giving up their home. 280 feet is not a mystical number. It is what happens when geology, labor, memory, and repeated crisis press a society downward. Every basket of excavated stone carries the same message. Life on the surface was worth preserving, but the surface itself could not always be trusted. Deep underground, the first killer may not be the invading army. It may be bad air. The true achievement of Derinkuyu is not simply the number of chambers. It is the fact that living bodies could remain inside them at all. Vertical shafts linked different levels, moving air through the complex. Some deep shafts also served water-related functions. Underground temperatures were relatively stable, shielding stored goods from the extremes above. But stability is not safety. People consume oxygen. So do lamps and cooking fires. Animals add heat, moisture, waste, and smell. Smoke gathers where airflow fails. A blocked shaft can turn a refuge into a sealed trap long before an enemy reaches the door. That is why the layout itself functioned like a survival algorithm. Livestock did not need to be driven to the deepest levels. They were large, difficult to move, and capable of choking a narrow passage. Supplies could be distributed so that the loss of one chamber did not destroy everything. Tight corridors forced intruders to crouch or advance in single file, while defenders who knew the route could control the space. Large circular stone doors could be rolled across passages from the inside. A small opening in the center allowed observation, limited airflow, or resistance against someone approaching from the other side. Individual levels could be isolated. Breaking through one barrier did not deliver the entire city. The goal was not maximum destruction. It was delay. The deeper an invader moved, the more his formation collapsed. Torches ran low. Directions became uncertain. Armor and long weapons turned from advantages into burdens. The people inside knew which corridor bent back, which shaft carried air, and which opening led nowhere. Architecture compressed the gap between the powerful and the vulnerable. Yet every defense also worked against the people it protected. Once the stone doors closed, escape became harder for everyone. Fires had to remain controlled. Too much smoke could poison the interior or betray a ventilation opening at the surface. Wells had to be guarded because any connection to the outside created another point of failure. Waste, sickness, panic. And death did not disappear merely because an enemy could not enter. Light required its own discipline. Too little, and people fell, became lost, or damaged supplies. Too much, and they consumed air and produced smoke. Lamps needed predictable positions. Routes had to remain recognizable in dim conditions. Openings at the surface could not advertise themselves with obvious heat, sound, or odor. There were no electronic sensors monitoring oxygen. People watched flames, smelled the air, felt changes in their bodies, and learned the behavior of each shaft. That knowledge had to be taught. Stone preserved the rooms, but memory kept the rooms alive. This is why depth was not a display of engineering vanity. The lowest spaces may not have been occupied every day. Their value was strategic, to separate risk into layers, slow down pursuit, and stretch the time between finding an entrance and reaching the heart of the refuge. Derinkuyu did not offer absolute safety. It offered hours, days, perhaps enough time for a raid to end and the world above to become survivable again. In a crisis, that delay could be worth more than any wall. The heaviest door in an underground city was not made of stone. It was made of discipline. Imagine the alarm. Children must be quiet. Animals must be guided through confined entrances. Grain, oil, water, tools. And lamps must move in order. Someone has to remain near the surface. Someone else must close each level. Certain shafts cannot be used for smoke. None of this can be debated after the enemy appears. For Derinkuyu to work, the surrounding community needed more than excavation skills. It needed shared memory, routes, signals, storage rules, duties, and an understanding of who moved where. The underground city was a machine built from rock, but its moving parts were human beings. That is the part most romantic accounts ignore. We celebrate an engineering marvel without asking who removed the waste, who repaired the shafts, who stood watch, and who ate last when supplies ran short. A refuge capable of holding a large population, even temporarily, required authority, division of labor, and trust. It may also have required strict control. The stone door kept enemies outside. It also locked everyone inside the same social order. Crowding would magnify every problem. Lamp smoke, animal heat, damp walls, illness, fear. The loss of privacy. Underground. Time becomes difficult to measure. A dull impact overhead can sound like a breached entrance. No one knows whether the attackers have left, and sending someone to check may reveal the hiding place. Safety, then, did not mean the absence of fear. It meant compressing fear into a smaller space and asking everyone to endure it together. Sound would shape power. Corridors carry footsteps, cries, and knocks. But echoes make their origins uncertain. Someone who understands the signal system can interpret danger. Someone who does not must trust the person who claims to understand it. Knowledge of the route becomes authority over reality itself. This reveals a paradox. The more complex a civilization becomes, the harder it is to flee. A mobile group can leave quickly. A settled community has fields, animals, grain stores, workshops, water sources, graves, and sacred places. It has too much life attached to one landscape. So the people of Cappadocia developed another form of migration. They did not travel toward a distant horizon. They moved vertically. They folded their settlement into the ground and waited. That may be the deepest psychological meaning of Derinkuyu. It was not a love affair with darkness. It was a refusal to abandon the surface forever. People endured confinement because they expected to return to their homes, fields, and sunlight. If permanent escape had been the only goal, building such an enormous network beneath the same land would have made little sense. But the Second World inevitably changed the first. A village with an underground refuge would store food differently, arrange entrances carefully, and preserve knowledge across generations. It might also obey differently. The people who controlled access, water, and information could become more powerful than those carrying weapons. Safety was an exchange. The individual received concealment, air, water, and collective protection. In return, the individual surrendered some freedom of movement and accepted the group's decision about when the doors would close and when they would open again. The underground city did not merely reveal how people survived an invasion. It revealed how crisis can reorganize a society before the enemy arrives. We like to imagine progress as an upward movement. Derinkuyu points in the opposite direction. Towers display power. Walls define territory. Underground cities refuse visibility. Their strength does not come from inspiring fear. It comes from making the attacker search, crawl, hesitate, and eventually run out of time. UNESCO's description of Cappadocia connects its subterranean settlements with refuge during later periods of invasion. Their defensive language was disappearance. That language never vanished. Modern cities bury transport, power, communications, and data beneath the street. Governments build shelters. Families prepare emergency supplies. The technology has changed, but the structure of fear remains familiar. When the surface order might fail, we try to reproduce a smaller world below Itone where air, water, information, and rules can keep moving. Derinkuyu warns us that a shelter is never just a machine. Even the strongest rock requires people to maintain the shafts, distribute food, care for the sick, and decide when it is safe to open a door. If trust collapses first, thicker walls may only trap frightened people together. Engineering can delay danger. It cannot answer the moral questions created by scarcity. Who receives water first? Who controls the entrance? Who carries news from the surface? Who decides that the threat has ended? In a closed system, the person who manages hope may hold more power than the person who owns a sword. That is the darker side of safety. Protection creates dependence. A sealed refuge concentrates the oldest problems of civilization: authority, fairness, sacrifice, and the amount of freedom people will surrender in exchange for survival. The 85 meters beneath Derinkuyu form something like a cross-section of the human mind. At the top is ordinary life. Below it are preparation, storage, defense, and obedience. At the deepest point lies a fear we have never outgrown, the knowledge that anything visible can also be targeted. The people who entered that darkness did not stop believing in the sun. They understood that sunlight reveals us to friends and enemies alike. What makes Derinkuyu astonishing is not simply how deep people could dig. It is how much they were willing to sacrifice in order not to leave. To abandon the region meant losing fields, water, trade routes, ancestral places, and the geography of memory. The underground city turned flight into waiting. It preserved the possibility of return. But every refuge carries a shadow. The better we become at hiding inside systems of protection, the easier it is to treat recurring danger as unchangeable weather. A stone door may stop a raider. It cannot stop the next war. A backup system may preserve daily life. It cannot repair the society that keeps producing collapse. This is why Derinkuyu is both magnificent and tragic. It proves that human beings can reconstruct life under extreme pressure. It also records a time when whole communities could not feel safe beneath an open sky. Engineering brilliance and historical cruelty were carved into the same rock. Today, our underground spaces may be physical, digital, or psychological, gated communities, encrypted accounts, backup generators, private networks, sealed information worlds. We think we have left Derinkuyu behind. Perhaps we have only made it invisible. When the next crisis comes, what will matter more, a thicker door, or the people we can still trust after it closes?